welcome to the Talk of Fame podcast. And on today's episode, we are introducing you to Morgan Richard Olivier. Morgan is an American best-selling author, advocate, wife, and speaker. With a passion for writing that serves as a form of therapy for both herself and her audience, Morgan's outlet for expressing fosters and supports conversations that are needed to stop stigmas and support healing, self-acceptance, and personal growth. Since publishing her first book, Questions Christ in the Quarter Life Crisis in 2020, and her poetry and prose collection Blooming Bear in 2021, Morgan has become a source of encouragement and empowerment to men and women worldwide. In 2022, she published her best-selling second poetry collection, The Tears That Taught Me Through Empathy and Wisdom from Lessons Learned, and she enlightens and inspires others to find a greater purpose in life's pains and pressures. Morgan's goal is to crush the image and the pursuit of perfection by captivating the raw beauty of sincere progress. Well, Morgan, welcome to the Talk of Fame podcast. I really appreciate you coming on and taking time. I love what you're doing, but especially how are you?
Thank you for having me, and I'm so happy to be here. I can't wait to dive into our conversations.
Yeah, so as most people know you, you are an author and you released some pretty amazing books. I took a sneak peek earlier when I was doing some research on you, and as I say, from the pages I read, they're pretty amazing. But how has, the journey been like for you since you published your first book back in 2020?
Well, it's been honestly nothing short of amazing. Whenever I published that first book, it was in the midst of COVID. So everyone was going through that phase. A lot of people doing a lot of inner work because we had no choice to. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I had gone through that season years prior. So by the time the book came out, I think it was the perfect timing for people to really search themselves, work on their faith, and really change their perspective. So from that point on, from the first book, Questions Christ in the Quarter Life Crisis, to Blooming Bear, to The Tears That Taught Me, One Still Whisper, um, and The Strength That Stays, I feel that it's a beautiful thing when readers can grow with you and see how your mindset changes over time.
Yeah, I love it. Like I know like with the pandemic, no one really had really any resources to go to school or get books and let's say maybe Barnes and Noble or their local library or something. And I know a lot of people have suffered mental health problems and they're looking for, some sort of faith during that time. And of course, when you are an author, like that is honestly a great time to really release a book since everyone had a lot of time on their hands to actually do something and yeah, at least take a read. Because of course we had tons of time and reading at that time was, give us a lot of time to dive into different things.
Right. I agree that it changed a lot of people as it really should have. So a lot of good came from that difficult time.
It really did. Like, do you think like COVID impacted like your writing process per se, or do you think it really haven't changed since
No,
the
I think it did. I think it did because, mind you, before I was a full-time author and speaker, I had a construction company as well as my own marketing agency.
pandemic?
So even when I released my first books, I was still, fully involved in those other industries. And, during that time, with people really diving more into their mental health and opening those conversations, it helped me professionally, personally, financially, transition out of those businesses so I can work fully in purpose work. And I think had COVID, I don't want to say had it not happened because again, it was a very heavy thing and it changed a lot of people's
Mhm.
lives. But I think COVID did have that one positive attribute to where a lot of people were able to see what it was like doing their purpose work or working remotely and could see, had that not happened, a lot of our mindsets would not have taken that shift.
You are so correct because when during that time, a lot of our minds really shifted to really maybe doing online school or doing work remotely to the point where mostly everyone is online in terms of work now. And like
Mhm.
you said, you're in construction, so of course everything's in person for construction.
Right.
And with that, when you shift into author and writing different things, it really you can basically mostly do it on your free time and do it at home or wherever you decide to do it. But every person's obviously different. But with doing writing books, it really takes it, you really have the advantage. You really do stuff at home, anywhere, any place. It's like with construction or maybe doing marketing, whether you're at like a full-time job in person or you're doing it remotely, you
Mhm.
can do either or in person or virtual. But COVID really shifted that change to mostly doing in-person work rather than online at home.
Right. Right. Mhm.
But why did you kind of, focus on poetry to showcase advocacy for healing, self-acceptance, and personal growth rather than maybe doing something else?
I think poetry, a lot of times whenever you're experiencing something that's foreign to you or you're, feeling a multitude of emotions simultaneously, it's difficult to articulate to that to people because number one, you're trying to figure it out. And also, if other people aren't in that mental, spiritual, emotional space, it's hard to make them understand something that they have no idea of. So when you think of poetry, it's a lot of analogies. It's a lot of, you may not know, for example, something that I've experienced, but if I could help you relate to an emotion and I can say, okay, um, I've endured this or I've experienced this, and I connect with you through pain or through analogy or through alliteration, you're more likely to receive the message and understand it, whether you walked it personally or not. So for me, it was easier to put my pain into poetry and into prose than it was to come out and just say everything because again, I didn't know how it'd be received. And also it was very therapeutic to take feelings that are so heavy and to turn them into something beautiful or profound.
And reading and writing, whether it's poetry or just regular writing, is something I hear from a lot of people that has helped deal with their emotions. And when people write things down, it really is a therapeutic tool, like you said before, is like when you don't know how you feel, does most people just write it down rather than explaining it to people how they feel is when they write it down, they're most likely to connect with their feelings rather than explain this to other people. Like of course, when for me personally, I always just yell it out for some reason, or just or just read my pain for some reason. It's always
Right.
different for everyone. But I know with poetry and writing, it's always such a big tool to let your feelings out, like emotionally or physically, in whatever you're feeling.
Right. Right.
Like, how
And
has, poetry impacted you therapeutically? Because of course, you write your feelings down when you're maybe upset or upset or whatever you're feeling, but how has it impacted you over these last couple of years?
it's definitely, mind you, I come from a Christian stance of being still. That's something that my church has always instilled in me,
Mhm.
as well as from a mental health standpoint to, take revelation instead of reaction oftentimes. So just like you were saying, how you might, you know, blurt something out or yell something out or react. For people that are more introverted or people whose response to stress and trauma is to freeze, having the ability to put something in words is so, I'd say, therapeutic and has so much peace attached to it because whether it's coming out of your mouth at the time, and mind you, seasons change. So there are seasons to be still and seasons to speak and be bold. But for those seasons of being still, it was a way for me to let out my experiences, let out my emotions. And though I wasn't speaking, with my voice,
Mhm.
I was releasing those weights from me and able to really give the rawest, parts of myself and parts of my soul that, people have forever. That's the beauty of writing. It's going to go on forever.
Yeah, and with writing, like it really is probably the most important therapeutic thing to most people. Maybe not for everyone. Of course, everyone deals with therapeutic things differently and has a different way of expressing themselves. But with writing or with just regular writing or writing poetry, it really is a main factor in releasing your feelings because whenever you hold your feelings in, it's gonna make you more harsh. That's probably the best word for it. But it's like when
Yeah.
you're putting it in, you're just gonna damage yourself more. But with
Yeah.
writing, it is such a big way to really letting those feelings go on paper, whether it's something small or something big. It can
Mhm.
make such a difference in how you live every single day, but not only maybe your thoughts or how you go throughout your day, but the way you kind of live life is such a big thing in terms of writing.
Right. I agree. I agree.
But did you ever experience you trying to live true to yourself? I know that is something you often talk about with your books and everything, but did you ever kind of experience that?
Uh, Struggling to live true. I couldn't understand. Was
Yeah,
struggle?
like trying to figure out how to be true to yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because I think that when you are in your teenage years, a lot of what you are, how you show up, or what you aspire to be or have is what you're exposed to that point, or what you're conditioned to want, or what you're conditioned, you have these timelines. But as you reach your mid-20s and you start discovering who you are and who you're not, and start asking yourself questions like, who am I? What is my purpose? Who are my friends? Am I doing this because I want to do this, or am I doing this because it's expected of me? When you come to that point, showing up as who you are becomes very confusing, because
Hmm.
you really realize that you don't exactly know who you are. So I had those seasons of my life where I felt completely lost. I felt like everything I said or everything I did was just off the wall, because I didn't know. And I think that's the part of the human experience that unfortunately we don't tell people in their 20s about. We don't warn them of this time and say it's normal to feel this anxiety or this depression or this confusion. And we also don't tell them that reality is not social media. Social
Hmm.
media is what people want you to see of them. It's their ego on display, or even yourself. So going and having that mental health therapy and learning more about God and who I am and who I belong to definitely made it a lot easier, because I realized for a long time in my life, I felt like I didn't belong, or I felt like I wasn't enough, or I was too much, because I really wasn't showing up as my authentic self yet. But once I
Hmm.
discovered that person, it was a lot easier, and I live a much more peaceful life because I know who I am and who I'm not. And I value alignment far more than acceptance these days.
Yeah, I totally get that because that is something that I personally deal with. I'm 17 years old, so I'm a little bit earlier in the game than some people. But
Yeah.
it's like when you're like dealing with that, struggling to feel like, oh, who am I as a person? Like am, who am I to other people? Because sometimes when you're having conversations with people, you feel like, why am I saying all these things? Like you just feel like you don't have control of what you say that is blurred out. And
Yeah.
that is something that I oftentimes see myself and try to control what I
Yeah.
say, but sometimes everything is blurred out. And I feel like everyone deals with that in some ways that like when you're trying to figure out, okay, who am I? What am I
Right.
saying? Like, yet sometimes some people, have to realize like, is this how I was raised? Is this
Yeah.
how I grew up doing? Like, you just sometimes have to ask some questions to yourself, like, is this who I am as a person? This is defined who I am, and this is defined how my family members or friends treat me.
Mhm. Right.
But how has your message with your books resonate with both men and women globally?
Well, my books definitely, one of the responses I get most often is, I always felt like this, but I didn't know how to say it. Or I feel this too. It's like you could have taken this out of my diary. And I think having conversations or diving into emotions and experiences, everyone talks about stopping the stigma, but until you talk about things, until you share things, you really can't. So I feel like my empathy and my ability to really dive into emotions has helped both men and women, because you have to think men, of course, have emotions, but they don't always share them the same way that we do. So it's created a safe space for people around the world.
And that's the most important thing I realized from a lot of people. that really like with the stigma around it, you really have to talk about your feelings in order to remove the stigma. And that is something that I learned from the last couple of years that I've been doing this is that like no matter if you want to talk about, a certain topic that might be important to you or something that's going on in the world right now, you're like, I want to put the stop to this, but how can I? That is honestly a big tool that I love that you brought up is that like a big sort of stigma is not talking about what matters to you or what you're trying to end. And of course, with self-growth and self-love is something that I know a lot of people suffer with, and I know it does have some stigma in trying to realize like, oh, I should talk about it because if I don't, who else who else is going to deal with this that don't have a voice. So it's really does some have that sort of stigma in trying to fix those things.
Yeah.
But of course, you've been a source of encouragement and empowerment for many people around the world. But how do you usually connect with your audience and foster meaningful conversations with different people?
Well, aside from the books, I definitely do more speaking now. And there's something so powerful, of course, with words and writing, but when
Mhm.
you're able to actually speak to a person, look them in their eyes, hug them, converse with them, that is really the next level and the next layer of my
Mhm.
purpose work. And a person that's, pretty introverted, I'm a very friendly person, but I say to myself a lot. I feel that, doing these speaking engagements, meeting readers, having these discussions is very helpful for all parties involved because you realize that there are a lot of people around the world that are like-minded, that have very similar experiences, emotions, and passions. And being able to share those testimonies is a beautiful thing.
And I know, like, I'm pretty introverted and extroverted. Honestly, it depends on the day for me. But when I do these episodes, I'm like, who am I? Like, what am I? Because, of course, when you're speaking, many people think, like, maybe you're introverted or extroverted. They don't know, but you might seem talkative. But
Uh-huh.
you might be shy on the inside. It depends who you are. Every person's different. But
Right?
I'm not usually talking like this when I'm around family, just FYI or friends. That depends on the person. But
Yeah.
really, that's how much speaking in front of crowds is such a self-confidence grower. Is that like, even if you might be very shy or maybe very quiet, it really is a big way for people to really start talking to other people and connect and try to grow yourself to talk to more people and to kind of not bring shyness out a little bit more.
Right. Right. For sure.
But how do you like usually envision continuing to inspire and support others through your writing?
I envision again, writing more. I'm constantly writing. I'm working on two new projects right now. I just came back from a West Coast book tour where I did press as well as did book signings. So doing a lot more face to face, a lot more interaction is really the next step for me in my purpose work and my writing.
I love it. And lastly, to wrap this up, like how can people connect with you and check out your books and everything you're doing?
Well, all of my books are available on my website, modernmorgan.com, as well as Amazon and other online retailers such as Walmart, Target, Barnes& and Noble. But you can also follow me on my social media on Facebook. It's facebook.com/modernmorgan. You can also search Modern Morgan on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, all the platforms.
Awesome. Go check her out. You heard her there. But thank you so much, everyone for listening. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode and I hope you guys learned some new things for this episode. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to her or me if you guys have any questions. But thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to talk about the amazing work you're doing. And I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, I truly value your time and love what you're doing with your platform.
Thank